Welcome to the monthly conversation with Konstantin, who is one of the most respected voices on YouTube about what is happening inside Russia. Konstantin Samoilov is a well-known YouTuber whose channel Inside Russia comments insightfully on Russia's descent into authoritarianism over the last few years, but now, like many others, he's outside of Russia with no idea of when he can return there. Thank you so much for tuning into Silicon Curtain. If you find this video interesting, please do like and subscribe so you don't miss any other episodes. And do, of course, share the link around with your friends. Consider becoming a patron if you like the work we do, or just buy me a coffee. Konstantin, I've really come to value these monthly conversations we have. I sometimes worry that we won't have enough topics to talk about. That hasn't happened yet because there's an extraordinary amount of stuff going on, isn't there?
Jonathan, hello, and fantastic to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I enjoy our conversations as well. It's a pleasure and honor. Thank you so much, and I'm honored to do another conversation. Thank you so much.
And this feels especially nice. It's a Sunday afternoon. I think we're both very relaxed. I've been walking out in the autumnal countryside, but at the same time, Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Russia is never far from, I think, my mind and that of many others. Let's have a quick rundown of what's been going on. There seems to be a whole flurry of economic news. We've got a fluctuating ruble exchange rate. There's talk about lack of liquidity in the economy, and of course, lots and lots of stuff going on. So, what's your sort of overview of the state of play?
Jonathan, I always compare Russian economy to the Titanic. See, when the Titanic was hit by the iceberg, then right after the collision, not much happened, and people who were on board, they didn't, see and feel much except for the collision itself, the shakes. But the damage was done, and the water started flooding the compartments. And it took people over 30 minutes just to notice things started changing with the ship. It's kind of the same thing that is happening to Russian economy. Okay, right after the war, the start of the war, about 20 months ago, things started happening. Russians started in an entire world started seeing the commotions inside Russian economy, but we start seeing real effects just about now. Okay, it's safe to say that the compartments of Russian economy have been flooded a great deal, and the results start showing. Generally, Russian economy keeps on sliding, but the slide has slowed down. There are two main reasons for that. One is external and one is domestic. Russia's been benefiting from the increased oil prices a few past months. It, again, just like in the first half of 2022, is earning much from oil exports. We'll talk about it in the details a bit later, but I want to stress that this fact that Russia is earning a lot from oil exports again is actually this has slowed down the demise of Russian economy. It's still on the way down, but a bit slower than a lot of experts, including myself, expected in the past. And the second reason is Russian government is using up all the remaining resources. They're doing their absolute best to give the sliding economy good face, to somehow stabilize the economy, because a very important event is coming up in Russia, the presidential elections in next March, just a few months around the corner. And before the elections, they don't want Russians to feel any hardship, to feel any financial pain. They want to smooth things out as much as they can. Comes March 2024, you're gonna start lots of things going very differently in the Russian economy. But this is a general overview. This is what's happening now. It's sliding, but a bit slower, or much slower than everyone had thought it would be.
And the Russian central bank met last week, and this was quite unusual. They seemed to give a fairly open and I think pessimistic assessment of the state of the economy. Now, Nabiullina and her team, who are so-called liberal economists, at least in terms of their, I would say they are quite a high class of professional economists. They have been quite instrumental in actually holding the economy together, but their latest assessment is got a relatively negative outlook.
I would say honest outlook. Negative, honest is the key word. You see, Elvira Nabiullina, the head of central bank, is the only person, in my mind, in the Russian state that's been given honest assessments of what's really, truly going on in the Russian economy. And her forecasts they're based on common sense, and they're based on real economics, Elvira Nabiullina, she tells the truth because she can. There's a saying that company too big to fail, and Elvira Nabiullina is too big to be fired. She's an integral part of the foundation of Putin's economy, and she's immune and free to say whatever she finds necessary. Okay, and that's why she speaks, because she won't be fired for that. She speaks all right. She speaks often, and she speaks honestly. She's pretty straightforward of what to expect, and she does press conferences, I think, every 2 to 3 weeks. And my biggest question to Russian people is why so few people listen to her? Because they need to understand what's coming. They need to listen to her. Anyway, in the latest press conference, it was quite lengthy press conference, but I've noticed 4 main things that she talked about, the 4 highlights, and let me give you those. Okay, number 1, Russian central bank is currently forced to conduct a very strict fiscal policy. The interest rate in Russia has doubled in 4 months. In July, it was 7.5%. And right now it's 15, which is crazy. And on December 15th, there will be another meeting of the board of central bank, and they will increase, most likely will increase 1 more percent, 16% key interest rate. It means that the businesses are taking out loans right now around 25%, and credit card payments over 35%, which is insane, Central bank does that to keep inflation under control, and this is one of the goals, I think, that central bank has, and including they want to keep the inflation under control for the presidential elections that are coming up in March. They will maintain strict fiscal policy for the next few quarters. That's what Elvira Nabiullina said. Few quarters. The best case scenario, the key interest rate will go down to 10% in 2025, to 6 or 7% to 2026. So you see, now they're talking 25, 26, long time from now. And, 7% interest rate is not the lowest. So let me translate you from central bank language to plain English. 2024, according to Elvira Nabiullina, will be absolutely disastrous for Russian economy. Basically, I've been telling that economic tsunami is coming to Russia. And my estimate was that we would be seeing the tsunami hitting Russian economy real bad now. Elvira Nabiullina thinks the same, only her forecast in 2024, in after the March of 2024. So the only way I've been wrong is on time period. It's going to happen, but a bit later than I expected.
But it
And
coincides with the election. So that is terrible timing for Putin. Not that we believe the election is any way free or fair, but clearly he doesn't want any disruption. He doesn't want any riots or protests happening or breaking out.
like I said, they want to smooth things out. Okay, they don't want prices going up, and that's the first thing that Russian people see. That's why central bank is so aggressive, raising the interest rate. But there are three more highlights that she made. She talked about the economic recovery might be coming in 2026, and it'll be slow. That's what she said. I agree with her. It's not coming anytime soon. Unlike what some experts say that Russia is going to recover in 2024. No, I totally agree with Elvira Nabiullina. The highlight number 3 is GDP growth will be very small and very, very slow. All resources for quick recovery after this disastrous spring of 2022, after the start of the war, they've been exhausted. And I also agree with Elvira Nabiullina. It makes a lot of sense from the economic point of view. And highlight number 4, the economy is undergoing a huge crisis of lack of labor force. Unemployment is disbalanced and it's way too low for one simple reason. Well, for two. First, different estimates from 2 to 3 million people have fled Russia, and they're white collar. They're highly educated. They're experts, professionals, and they're all over the world. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Georgia, Southeast Asia, they have fled Russia, just like myself, just like our community, the Tashkent Breakfast Club in Tashkent. And of course, the reason number 2, so many people have been mobilized, thrown into the front lines, and so many people have been dead, killed, and, injured, and basically out of labor force. And I again agree with Elvira Nabiullina. That's a huge, huge, huge disaster that is happening in the Russian economy.
Absolutely, the effects of that. And there's another thing we'll come to, I think, later, which is the brain drain. The number of people, especially experts, who are not just temporarily sucked out of the economy, but once they get established in the West, and maybe they'll need some other qualifications and so on. But how many of them will return? Well, we'll come to that one a little bit later. Sticking with the interest rates. Obviously, this creates a huge problem for businesses who are trying to invest and build their enterprises, but also has a huge knock-on effect on consumers. And there was an interesting sort of a video on YouTube with Vladimir Milov and Michael Naki, where they were discussing the amount of personal bankruptcy, credit, debt, and the fact that some people clearly are making money out of the war, but on average, average incomes have fallen by up to a half average monthly incomes, really over the last couple of years, if we include the period from 2018, financial crisis, all the way through COVID to the present. This is a huge drop in average incomes at a time where prices are also rising. So what do you think is the effect on consumers over the last couple of years?
There is a perfect storm above Russia, and it's not going anywhere. It's not passing. It's staying about Russia. It's spinning, and it's spinning faster and faster. And a big part of it is a growing financial crisis. There are too many different parts of the storm, and financial crisis is a big one. The latest numbers are out today. Monthly growth of Russians' debt, personal debt, now is it's a record for more than a decade. Okay, just in September alone, it added 1 trillion rubles. This is unheard of. Okay, people are taking out more and more loans. The problem debts are growing because you are absolutely right. The real incomes are dropping. The prices are rising. Inflation is really high. We're waiting for the numbers at the end of the year. but even the government numbers well in double digits. That's a lot. And the real inflation, real life numbers, they're going to be much higher. And the bad debt is growing. According to the Service of State Collectors, this FSPP in Russia, as it's called, on average, for every adult Russian, there's 360,000 rubles as a personal loans from commercial banks, either from commercial banks, which is not the worst case scenario, or from microfinance organizations. That's basically shark loans. They're legal in Russia. They just give you small loans, but a huge percent the interest rate. We are seeing the decrease in the growth rate of household incomes and real wages right now. It's a real thing. And total credit debt of citizens today is becoming a super urgent problem for the state, for the commercial banks. It's problem for country's economy, and it's a social problem. Potential drive for civil unrest. Okay. And to top off this cake with cherry, the volume of delinquencies of Russians on mortgages reached 75.6 billion rubles. The numbers are out today, according to National Scoring Bureau. This crisis is growing. Okay, it's a no-brainer to understand that there's a huge wave of personal defaults is coming. Perhaps, well, most definitely, companies will be defaulting as well because interest rate is too high. You cannot do business at the key rate with a key rate of 15% right now. Okay, and if the markets are shrinking, if the people have less money to buy things, then definitely the hard times ahead of the companies. And people who have taken out record number of loans, it's really, I think it's hard for us to even understand this wave of bankruptcies and defaults that is coming in 2024 and 2025. That's going to be huge. That's going to bury the financial system in Russia.
And to pick up on that phrase, and it's actually tragic and appalling. There was a recent mobilization campaign which exactly targeted people who are in debt, who are in despair. And of course, the law has been put through recently that you can have not an amnesty from your debts, but you can get protection from your debtors if you sign up and sign a military contract to go to the front. So the absolutely pernicious advert, which shows some loan sharks coming to beat a guy up, and he's able to show them a contract he's just signed with the Ministry of Defense, and they're like, damn, we can't touch you now. And his family are ecstatic or whatever. I mean, it's incredibly cynical and it's incredibly tragic. But of course, the government is using this debt scenario to recruit for the front lines.
It's inhuman. Jonathan, it's really hard for me to understand how my country, who used to be somewhat normal, in the past, have gone to this situation where these people are not acting as humans, but as animals, It's really sad. It's really sad. Another problem is the ones who are fighting in Ukraine right now in the front lines, they're making money, all right, and they start spending because most people they have never seen so much money in their hands. And then once easy money comes, the ones you don't really earn in a hard way, you start spending frivolously on booze, on parties, and on consumer electronics and personal things and stuff like that. And then you run out of it and you go and take out more loans because now your income allows. But what happens when you're back? What happens if you're dead? What happens to your family? What happens to the loans? Okay, so that's another problem.
It's horrific and pernicious. The other cloud on the horizon, of course, is the dramatic increase in the percentage of the budget that is going to be assigned to military expenditure last year. Now, the public headline amount is likely to be lower than the actual amount because there are a number of, let's say, sort of secret line items for military projects which are not disclosed. But nonetheless, even the publicly accessible or announced number is a dramatic increase in the percentage of GDP going on military expenditure. And that is not an economically productive resource, is it? I mean, it's going into equipment, it's going to fighting. It's not actually going to produce any long-term benefit for the economy.
A lot of mostly foreign experts have been saying, oh, look, Russia has not gone down the drains. Russian economy is somehow recovering. And that was the main drive of that recovery. You know, the military industrial complex, Russian state has been pouring money into military industrial complex, into state-owned companies and private companies who produce everything war, you know, and people started making decent money there in the military industrial complex. And that's what fueled the economy for some time. Increased oil export revenues in 2022. And you get one of the reasons why Russian economy is not down the drains, but just getting there. And it's actually getting not as fast as a lot of us had thought it would be going. So the production of military industrial complex obviously has increased, and it's been driving the economy, allowing it to stay afloat somewhat. But all other sectors of the industry, they've been suffering greatly.
And of course, the oil revenue has gone up. The price cap, which was supposed to limit the amount of money earned on oil, it worked for a period, but it seems not to be working quite as effectively now. But Russia has also created a fleet, a grey fleet of tankers. It is rumored that potentially, of course, Greece has helped put together some of these or sell the boats. It's also rumored that who else has the resources to do this? Well, China clearly does. Also, we have huge amounts of grain being stolen and shipped out. Again, these grain need to be put in certain ships with a certain tonnage. It's quite a sophisticated operation. Not proven, but we are going to try and talk to some experts about where Russia is getting this capacity from, both for oil and grain exports. Now, these are clearly powering the military-industrial complex, keeping the war going. What's your view here? I mean, has the Western alliance really, taken their eye off the ball? Why haven't we tried to close these loopholes down? And how have we really let Russia rebound in some, short-term manner to sustain its war effort?
You see, oil exports have been the biggest loophole, in my opinion. There are rumors that, well, first of all, the oil sanctions were placed upon Russia starting the effect starting December 6th of last year. So it's going to be 1 year and a week. And the sanctions this Europe was banned from buying Russian oil altogether, and everyone else, the price cap was introduced, $60, and it worked for first few months. And if you were looking at Russian budget, you would see that the Russian budget deficit was growing because that price cap was working. And then Russians have been able to circumvent the sanctions. Okay, there are two reasons for that. They started inventing the ways to go around the sanctions, and of course, this Israel-Hamas war has contributed to oil price spikes in the global markets. But the rumors have it, I cannot confirm it, but the rumors have it that one of the key strategies that Russia has to circumvent oil sanctions, price cap, is to buy own tankers and operate them. And then obviously you cannot build oil tankers that fast, and Russia does not have capacity, neither capacity nor money. But from what I understand, they've been buying old tankers bound for scrap from the Greek, like you said, and they're operating a fleet of a few hundred old tankers now. And it means that they can bypass the sanctions, because the sanctions aim the companies, the insurance companies, the shipping companies that help Russians to sell oil, to transport oil that is sold at higher than $60 per barrel. Okay. So in such instance, a shipping company or insurance company, logistics company would be sanctioned by the US and international authorities. But since Russians are doing everything in-house, they've been able to circumvent it. But now what's happening is the United States is closing this gap, from what I understand. They're looking closely at who is operating the ships, who sold the ships, the tankers, oil tankers, and so forth. And they're taking a very more personal approach, and they're placing personal sanctions. And from what I understand, this loophole is getting closed, that's patched up.
And about time, definitely, because there are several loopholes as well in supplying the military-industrial complex. There is also a components loophole where clearly chips are getting through, components for helicopters, drones, and other munitions are still getting through. Some of these are certainly manufactured in Western European countries. Whether it's purely illicit or governments turning a blind eye, it's an incredibly sort of dangerous phenomenon. And dare I say it, there are still companies operating in Russia, some of the largest ones, including its rumored Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and others. There's a recent article in the Financial Times that lists them all. What's your view of Western companies that are still operating either directly or through local subsidiaries or shell companies?
First, let me talk about the supplying military technology into Russia, how trading is done. You're spot on. There's been quite a lot of importing into Russia of different semiconductors, electronics that is used in the military industrial complex, basically in the missiles and the weapons that are fired, that are shipped to Ukraine and used to kill the Ukrainians. Okay, so and then the Western components are being used extensively there. It's really hard, from what I understand, it's really hard to catch those who do that. But I have heard of cases when individuals have been caught and the companies have been caught and the sanctions have been placed. As far as I understand, there's not one system, just like, for example, with the oil tankers. Okay, you cannot just cover the entire industry and find everyone. But from what I understand, here in Tashkent, on 2 occasions, I've run into the Americans who moved here, and they're looking for companies and people here, Russians who try to organize logistics, to circumvent these bans of semiconductor importing into Russia, that can be used in the military stuff. I did not meet anyone officially. I met a couple times at the restaurants, and I overheard conversations that at lunches people were discussing what they were doing. So I know that there are some people from the USA who are looking for that, and I'm pretty sure that there are people in other countries such as Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, that hunting down those who are doing that. How effective it is? It's hide and catch game, or hide and seek. Anyway, so they're trying to catch these people, and the people change their strategies all the time. But at least the West is trying to do something. And the companies that are still staying in Russia, well, you see, it's not so easy to leave. I'll give you an analogy. When the war started on the 24th of February of 2022, I, along with my wife, we were devastated. Okay, and we made the decision to leave Russia on that same very day. But it took us quite a few months to organize our departure. It's not that easy. You can't just get up and go. In some cases, you can. Companies like McDonald's, Apple, IKEA, they just close their doors and that's it. But other companies, they cannot do that. And Russian authorities have made it much more difficult for this key companies such as Unilever, Carlsberg, the big ones to leave Russia. They've created different laws that prevent Western companies from easily leaving Russia. Take Raiffeisen Bank. From what I understand, the company would lose most of its business, as basically it'd be most of the sale would be taken by the Russian state, or in other words, stolen. And I am pretty sure they also are blackmailing the company, going after the executives. If the company wants to leave Russia, then the executives would, get in trouble with the Russian law. I think that's what's going on. These companies are trying to get out of Russia, but they're doing the best they can. You got to understand it's not easy. They are against Russian government, who is not allowing them to leave.
And of course, we can't discount the idea that maybe some of these executives might have what's called compromat, or details about their personal lives, which, of course, the Russian state wouldn't hesitate to use and leverage that kind
Absolutely.
of stuff. Yeah.
Very possible. I think Russian state is, when we talk about this issue, we got to talk about the certain organization who's organizing this obstacles, from leaving. And that organization is the FSB. And I'm pretty sure they use anything they have, anything they can get their hands on, to not allow to these Russians to make leaving as difficult as possible. And yes, I think that some individuals might have something that they don't want to public to know about them.
Our next topic is quite a tricky one, but it's started to emerge from a number of interviews that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. And this is the idea that Putin has now constructed a war economy, that his actual regime is relatively stable because people like you who are critical have gone, and to an extent he allowed people to leave who were likely to resist the regime. But all sorts of sectors, from the military-industrial complex, from a lot of industries being retooled towards war. A lot of people have an interest, including Z Patriots, bloggers, and so on. So it's almost as if this is now a war economy, and it's a one-way track. If there was to be a genuine peace, and I think you and I are probably quite cynical about how possible that is under Putin, but what do you think? If the war was to stop, would this imply that Putin's regime would actually crumble, and then all the discontent that's been building up would break out into the surface? So in some ways, he cannot end the war now. He's on a one-track direction.
I would say that this is not 100% war economy at this point in Russia, but it's definitely on the way there. And there are signals coming from everywhere that the total war economy is coming. And the latest and the strongest signal for me is Patrushev meeting the governors. Patrushev is the secretary of Russia's Security Council, right? And that's right now this guy is number 2 in Russia, and he was meeting Russian governors last week, and he was ordering them to start preparing of changing economy of their provinces toward war economy. Okay, and it's a clear signal, biggest one, but not the only one, that the state is looking that direction. And I think what's going to happen is they're not going to change anything until March, until the presidential elections. And after that, you watch. I think that there's going to be a big shift. This one thing, though, war economy is really bad for regular people because their living standard, their lives will be sacrificed to the goal of keeping the country afloat. Okay, so, and that's a system that can be sustained for a long time, that can exist for a long time, for years. Okay, and you're absolutely right about that. It's not going to be good for the people. There will be no freedom of doing business. There will be no personal freedoms of any kind. Not like that too many left in Russia, but it will be even fewer. The biggest question is, will this happen? Because I think there's still a way to reverse that. It can be reversed. I've been saying for quite some time that the victory for Ukraine will not come from the front lines. It will come from within Russia. Okay. What's happening right now is there is a possibility of political unrest. It's actually started with Prigozhin's mutiny, and Prigozhin was the president. He showed the elites, the power groups inside Russian state, that it's very possible. Okay. And there are so many of those who are benefiting from the war, and they're making more money, but at the same time, they don't have anywhere to take that money out to. They cannot maintain lifestyle that they're used to. They cannot send their families abroad and have them living freely and normally like they used to. They cannot transfer their money to the USA, to France, to the UK, to London. The money is going to be confiscated. There are examples like that. Abramovich, Friedman, Aven, and other oligarchs. So these people are weighing their options. What is hurting them more? Are they making money from the war economy, or are they hurting from the war economy? Okay. And I think this is a quite interesting situation happening right now.
That's one of the reasons why they sort of stood back, weren't they, during the Prigozhin Putin standoff? They just all stood back and like, okay, let's just wait and see who's going to be the next boss.
And if Prigozhin kept on going and moved to the Kremlin, I'm sure we'd be seeing a completely different picture and a completely different Russia right now. Okay. So, and you're absolutely right. They were not. Everyone was silent, quiet, waiting what happens next. So, if they decide, some power group decide that enough, they're hurting from the war economy more than they're benefiting, then I think they would be taking actions. And it's easy. Once you take power, you seize power, you start blaming Putin and everyone else. Oh, we didn't know. Oh, if we had known, of course we wouldn't have went along with them, or they forced us, they blackmailed us, or, things like that. So they basically will blame Putin for everything, and will say, "Hey, the West, we're ready to be good again. We're ready to negotiate. Let's get back to normal, or at least somewhat normal. Please let us back in. We'll do anything you say." Okay, I think that's a real reasonable way how this can be reversed. I'm not saying if it happens, I'm not saying it's going to be too great for Russia. Well, obviously the bloodshed will stop. That's going to be great for Ukraine, and Russia is going to pay for what it's done in Ukraine. But the power group will not necessarily change Russia into a democratic state. There will be another dragon born, and another dragon will run Russia, if you know what I mean. But The reverse from war economy, I think, is possible. How probable it is, I don't know.
At this point, a lot of stuff is up in the air, and it's interesting you mentioned the figure of Patrushev, because he's been, I mean, for those who are, let's say, Kremlin watchers, he's a familiar name, along with Surkov and others who operate behind the scenes. And ironically, Surkov, his name has been recently mentioned as well after a long absence from the sort of frontline politics, as it were. But Patrushev has been far more prominent of late. And there's this extraordinary video. Now, we discussed it at length. I think some of the audience were a little upset that we discussed conspiracy theory at such length. But Patrushev has been far more prominent than he normally is. And he also seemed to give a rather curious, almost like funeral oration for Putin, that really stoked the rumors about whether Putin's actually died and one of his body doubles is in control. Now, my view on this is that he's recently announced that his Valdai press conference is going to go ahead. I doubt whether they'd risk doing that with a double. But what do you think is the importance of Patrushev's increasingly visible role?
When I was asked this question 100 times. Do you think that Putin died? My stand on this has been unchanged, and I keep telling everyone, no one knows. I don't know, and no one can even know, because if it really happened, very few people, very close circle would know, and they would definitely not leak any information. Okay, so we have no clue. But we can look closely for the events that start unfolding in Russia, and that might give us an understanding what's happening in Russia, okay? And one of those things is Patrushev, the guy who's been the great cardinal of Siloviki in Russia for the past 25 years. First, for 8 years, I think he was the director of FSB, the most powerful organization in Russia. And then he became the secretary of the Security Council. Basically, he oversees KGB and all other power agencies who have right to use violence against Russian people. So he's probably one of the most, if not the most powerful person in the Russian politics, okay? But he's always been in the shadows. He's always been behind the curtains, pulling the strings. And all of a sudden, he's gone public. And that really puzzles me. And that really tells me that something is going on, something very, very intense. Under the rug, like the Churchill said, Russian politics is, many bulldogs fighting under the rug. You don't know what's going on. So, but we definitely see that there's a fight going on under that rug, because Patrushev, gosh, never, was a public person. He never made public statements, speeches. And all of a sudden, he gets out and he speaks of Putin as Putin is no more. And then after that, he summons the governors and orders them to prepare to turn their economies of the provinces to war economy. I mean, who is this guy? It's not his job. It's not his position to do that. He cannot make decisions. And definitely the governors do not answer this guy, but they do now, obviously, okay? And an interesting observation is that, well, think about this. Vladimir Putin decided that he would run for another term in 2024, a long time ago, many years ago. In 2020, they changed Russian constitution, just for this to be able to happen. Okay, so imagine he made a decision way before changing the constitution. So it's easy to say that the plan was made long time ago. So he is currently not making a decision whether to run or not. If everything is normal, if everything is going according to his own plan, then he would have announced that he was running for the president already by now. Yet there has not been the announcement. Okay, there were rumors that he was going to announce in the beginning of October, then November, then no, beginning of November, middle November, and now December 15th. If everything is fine, if nothing's disturbed, then why didn't he come out and say, "Oh, I'm going to run for the president in next March"? That's very strange thing in my mind. And there's right now the key milestone is the announcement. If it happens on the 15th of December, like there are rumors right now, 13th, 14th, or 15th of December, we'll see soon in a couple of weeks. Then if Putin comes out and says, I'm going to run for 6 more years, then most likely nothing have changed. And the political landscape is not about to change, at least until the presidential elections. And if it is to change, that's going to be a forced change, forced from the outside, from one of the elite groups. But there's a different possibility that Putin would say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna step down. I'm not gonna run. I gotta give room for new faces, to younger people to run. And then it would show us that something very, very major happened in the Russian, behind the curtains of the Russian politics in the very recent past. Okay. So we're waiting for this announcement, waiting what's going to happen.
And I think it's interesting that at this very moment, the names of Sergei Kirienko and even Vladislav Surkov, as I say, who's been out of the scene for a long, long time, fell out of favor with Putin. Their names have resurfaced in the last couple of weeks. We also see Ksenia Sobchak, who, you know, people often mistake her for, I think, a genuine liberal politician. The fact is she could not operate and say the things she does and remain in Russia, not behind bars, unless that was officially sanctioned in some way. But you do see the potential lineup there of nominally liberal figures. And it's my view that actually they, you know, in order to regain trade with the West and get sanctions lifted, you couldn't have a hardline nationalist in place because the West would naturally not really want to deal with that. So what you're likely to get next is a liberal puppet. But this is all, you know, extreme speculation. But it's as you say, it's interesting that there may be some undercurrents going on behind the scenes to watch out for. At the same time, the economy is under extreme duress. If we look at the lowering of production of cars, which was announced recently by major manufacturers in Russia, we look at the issue of planes being grounded, planes obviously getting damaged because of spare parts, computers, drills, infrastructure. Are we starting to see that sort of infrastructure, industrial infrastructure, buckle and break under the sanctions regime?
You know, you're spot on about those new names, old new names resurfacing again. Kirienko, he's been running the show in the shadows. Okay, he's never stepped away anywhere. But you're absolutely right. His name never resurfaced, and now it starts resurfacing. Same as Sobchak and Surkov. Yeah, Surkov out of nowhere, boom, he's kind of back in the media space. And this is it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the bulldogs fighting underneath the carpet. We don't know what's going on there. We just simply don't have information, just rumors. And it would be crazy to believe rumors, right? But we're seeing that the fact that there's something going on. And that already in itself, that's much to think about. Moving to the infrastructure. Well, infrastructure has started buckling and breaking. Okay, we clearly seen that in the aviation industry. because I think that's the most sensitive industry among them all. I'm actually in the works of doing a separate video on that, how Russian aviation has suffered, and basically it's declining a big time, because despite that the Russian airlines are able to buy some parts, that's not enough. They buy through Chinese, they try to circumvent the sanctions. That's not enough. They cannot outsource vital maintenance procedures and so forth. They're cannibalizing planes. There are so many planes they lose every month. So another problem is that Russia is not pumping as much oil as it used to, because turns out Russians don't have the technology to drill, to maintain, to produce equipment. They outsourced everything from the evil satanic West, So once the evil satanic West stepped away and left Russia, then they don't know what to do. Computers, not so much, because it's much easier to buy computers from somewhere else. China is willingly selling tons of stuff to Russia. China has stepped in to sell its made cars that are made in China. It's selling to Russia, but unfortunately they're very low quality, and so the first Chinese cars hit Russian market 18 months ago, and then they start falling apart now. There are reports from Russian garages all over the country that the Chinese cars are not that reliable. And there are lots of problems with procuring spare parts for the Western cars, that the manufacturers that pulled out of Russia, and they simply cannot get auto parts for Mercedes, the German cars, the Korean cars, and so forth. There's not too many ways left to get heavy machinery into Russia, although Russians are buying, but not as much and not as easy as it used to. It takes longer time, and it becomes much more expensive. And energy equipment, the manufacturers of large turbines, Siemens, General Electric, have pulled out of Russia. It's a crisis going on. You cannot replace Siemens turbines with the Chinese ones. I come from the energy business, and I know what I'm talking about. Basically, there's a case, one of the Russian large oil natural gas exporters that is still operating right now, ordered 6 large turbines from the Chinese and not last year, and they've been delivered. They cannot commence them. They're just not working. So these guys have no clue what to do. They need to produce the power, electricity, but the turbines just don't spin. Chinese cannot commence them in time. So
this is not a good sign. That's
no,
not a good sign.
It's a sign that everything is in decline. Okay, it's not as fast decline as a lot of people thought it would be, but it's definitely, in the long run, this decline is catastrophical for the country. And Jonathan, I don't think that's the last thing here is, even if the regime changes in Russia, even if a new liberal puppet or not puppet or any kind of change in Russia, the sanctions will not be lifted the very next day. Okay, it's going to be a very long and a very difficult, painful process. And I've heard that opinion. As soon as the war with Ukraine is over, special military operation, whatever they call it in Russia, is over, the next day the West will come back. They will lift the sanctions. They will start selling us everything. Yeah, right. Okay, so that's not going to happen. So I think in the long run, Russia is absolutely 100% is facing a huge decline everywhere. Because infrastructure will bring technology down, will bring economy down. an economy, there won't be much money to. It's like catch-22. You know, there won't be any investment. There are any investments now to develop any technology because all the investors have gone. The only investor is the Russian state. There won't be any in the future as well. So the decline is here. It can be seen, and it's to stay for a long time.
And of course, companies that have seen either their assets or the assets of other Western companies basically thieved, they're not going to be in a huge rush to return.
Bill Browder is a good example. You know, this guy got out, and he made sure he went extra mile to put people under sanctions who, organized the death of Magnitsky and who stole the money. Okay, he went extra mile to create Magnitsky Act. Okay, and I'm pretty sure that those who were treated unfairly, and I'm putting it mildly, in Russia, I'm pretty sure they're gonna go out and out of their way and make sure that the sanctions are to stay, not to be lifted, and the Russians who did that to them will pay for what they've done.
Absolutely. And, Bill Browder is still an incredibly vocal critic. He's in close talks with some of the opposition, like Mikhail Khodorkovsky, and they share similar views on exactly what you've said there. I think the last topic is quite a difficult one because I watched your videos around the time and subsequently you treated this subject incredibly movingly and with passion. And that was the anti-Semitic protests in Dagestan at Makhachkala airport. We saw the footage of that. It's deeply shocking. And of course, it has terrible resonance from history as well. I mean, the word pogrom originated from Russia. And what we saw there was an attempted pogrom. What are your thoughts now? There's a little bit of distance from the actual events.
I am very disappointed. I'm very hurt that these events happened in my country. People that I used to live right next to did that. It's incredible. It's hard to believe. Pogroms are back to Russia 118 years later, and it's a shame. It's a shame. I'm very ashamed. I think that this is a sign, sort of a preview of what's to come to Russia, because a Russian state has created this such strict atmosphere in Russia to keep people in place. Okay, but they lose control. In order to be successful at that, they need to keep control at all times over everyone, but they cannot do that. Russian state is not so powerful, okay? And things start breaking, start snapping, where usually in Russia they say it breaks where it's thin, okay? And they cannot control the feelings and the emotions of people. They have created anger inside people, and this anger is not going anywhere, and what we saw, the Dagestanians, they simply picked Jewish as target, and they started channeling their anger to the Jews for some reason that I don't understand, but the Russian government has shown that it's lost control, and I think the events like that will be happening more and more. Again, this is a precedent, and it's a shame. I'm really, I don't know what to tell you. I'm ashamed that it happened in the country that I was born and raised in. But unfortunately, I think that it's not the last time that we saw something like that.
Unfortunately, I absolutely share that concern as well. And of course, this anger, this anger is going to be building and building, almost like a sort of pressure cooker. And when it does come out, the longer it's suppressed, the worse it's going to be. And it won't just be sort of Jews who are the targets of that. There'll be many, many targets, I think, when it does break. Konstantin, I think these are incredibly important.
Just to let you know that there are 600 Jewish families live in Dagestan. 600. And a lot of them started making plans on moving away from Dagestan. And if I was Jewish, I would definitely not live there any longer. But the thing is, I want to ask you a question. What happens when the Dagestanians run out of Jews? 600 for the entire province is not a huge number. Who are they going to go after next?
It's going to be other minorities. It may even be, apparatchiks.
It's going to be the Russians.
It's going to be the Russians, exactly right.
Yeah. Yes, it's going to be the Russians. So, and this is going to be the precedent. And you watch, there are many other states when the Russians are the minorities, Far East and, the Caucasus, and you watch. It's starting to happen.
And they'll turn on their own elites, who are, some of whom, of course, will be from the Soviet inheritance, will have sort of dual cultures or won't necessarily be hostile. They're going to turn on their own elites who work with Russia as well. It's going to be very tough, I think, in the coming months and years ahead. Konstantin, these feel like incredibly important conversations. I'm so grateful to you for spending the time and sharing your insight. And I'm glad that we can bring these to a wider audience on a monthly basis. Thank you.
Jonathan, this is my pleasure. Thank you very much. Speaking to you is always great. It's thought-provoking. And I hope that lots of people hear what we talked about. I feel it's incredibly important to know for everyone who is interested in what's happening in Russia. Because, it's sad. It's sad. I hope this bloodshed will end soon. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And I look forward to the next time. Thank you, Konstantin.
Same here. Thanks. Bye-bye.